been increasing noise in the past few years on campuses and in the media about how we need to restrict some speech because it's hate speech or intolerant, or in some other way offensive to somebody. Opponents of these restrictors focus on the right we have to free speech in the Constitution and the intolerance and tyranny that result from the lack of it, all of which have some merit, but they also miss the point. This video addresses why freedom of speech is required for a healthy society beyond the necessity for a right to it. The human ability to communicate binds society together. Think of each instance of speech as an attempt to make a connection. It can connect me to you and you and you and you and so on. Imagine if we did not have speech. What kind of society would we have? None. We would not even be at the level of brute animals, as they have their own forms of communication. I'm not just talking of verbal speech either. Any kind of communication, such as texting, is also a form of speech, if it has the capacity to bind us together. It is this ability to bind society together that makes speech so much more than just its ability to cause offense. Should we limit our freedom of speech based on whether it causes offense? It's a difficult question to answer without first understanding what that simple division would mean. If we look at all speech based on whether or not it causes offense, we can see that there are four types: offensive, inoffensive, neither, or both. When I receive any form of speech, I will assign it to one of these categories. How I react to this speech will then determine if, how much, and what kind of societal connection is formed. If I say something to you like, I call you he, and you don't identify as such, and you find that speech to be offensive, then we do not form a connection. Terms such as fuck you and kiss my ass are similar offensive terms. If I refer to you as your preferred pronoun, then you assign that speech as inoffensive, and we form a basic connection. Terms such as thank you and excuse me are similar inoffensive terms. But these types of speech form little to no societal connections. Obviously, offensive speech forms none, and inoffensive speech forms a connection so shallow that it is ineffective as a means of holding society together. If our society is held together by nothing but verbal placebos, it is not very strong. There are massive amounts of speech that are taken to be neither offensive nor inoffensive. We don't react to them at all. These are questions or statements of fact. What time is it? Water boils at 100 degrees Celsius. What goes up must come down, etc. Some claim facts are taken as offensive. Evolution, global warming, male and female biology, etc. The difference here is if the speech is assigned by the recipient to be part of a factual interchange. If it is factual to the recipient, then there is no offensive classification. It is null speech, and quite a bit of our society is connected by our relations to facts, whether they are in questions or statements. Finally, we get to the most crucial type of speech, that which is both offensive and inoffensive. How can any speech be both? Because the recipient must think about the speech to classify it. There is no automatic acceptance or rejection of it based upon preconceived notions. We must think to react. While we are in the process of analyzing the speech, it exists in the quasi-land of both offensive and inoffensive speech. It can be either one or neither one. This undefined state has a complex capacity to form the most societal connections. While speech is in the both category, when we must think, we have the option of being either offended by it or not. This is the time when we can connect most with other people. This is when we can learn empathy, compassion, justice, right and wrong, good and bad, the intangible concepts that hold any society together. These connections come from accepting people who are not like us, who do not fit into the mold of past life. If you automatically assign speech to be either offensive or inoffensive, then you lose the ability to make these connections, to expand yourself beyond the limitations of past offenses. Freedom of speech is required for a healthy society so we can make these types of connections. Limiting freedom of speech is a path to the future destruction of society. Any society is subject to violence, which destroys instead of builds. Violence attacks the stability of a society's structure. But the more connections a society has, the harder it will be for violence to destroy it. Limiting speech creates a fragile structure because it ends up limiting all speech, including the indeterminate speech required to form intangible connections. Limiting hate speech paradoxically means that violence resulting from hate is more likely to destroy society than if it is left free to be offensive and form no connections. If the freedom to form connections is limited, then society is doomed to form them based on past offenses. No society connected in this fashion has a future. That is all.